Hey, this is 6bolt in Von Doom's lab. This video is part of the technical support videos, but this one's a little different. This is going to go over why I don't give any technical support for Hook of the Reaper. And I think most people know. I mean, if you go into the GitHub and read the read first thing for the issues, I think you might have a good sense of why that is. And, if you go to GitHub, I think this is, it right here. So if you go to issues, then you come down here, there's read first. And if you read it, it kind of goes into kind of what was happening with it and all that. But pretty much at the beginning of Hook of the Reaper project, I did give technical support for Hook of the Reaper. Most of all, there was only like really a handful of bugs. I think like two or three. I think when like pretty much I remember one big one was when it ran, kind of where you ran it, where it tried to make the file. So if you use the run config, where you ran that run config, it actually would make the data file and the default LG file and all that, because it thought it was in that directory, and I fixed that one real quick. But that was a good example of like a real bug that happened. But it was not that many of them. There was like a handful. It was more enhancements requests that I got. But like in the other video I got when I first started the release, I pretty much was getting overwhelmed with the demolish shooter turn green but no recoil bug that I kind of went over in the technical support. This is where, a lot of times people run TechnoParrot for the game and inputs, then they run demolish shooter to get the outputs, then Hook of the Reaper takes the outputs and does the force feedback. But like a lot of times, like I said, is they run it, demolish shooter turns green, then they get no recoil. Well, that's Hook of the Reaper's fault kind of thing. And tons of people just started filing kind of bugs like that. Hey, this is not working. These games are not working. And I was like, wow, I mean, that's kind of crazy. When I do it, it worked fine. What's going on? So pretty much for 2 weeks, for a stretch, for 2 weeks, that's all I did was this do technical support. I was pretty much trying to figure out what these people are running into and what's going on. And pretty much, like I said, all of them had to do with like demolish shooter turning green and no recoil. And I run it, it kind of runs fine. And that's kind of like, I was like, okay, you have to read, the wiki. But like I said, and most people know I am disabled. So I don't have a whole bunch of energy or time to do things for technical support. So I'm pretty much using almost all my energy and time to help these people out for 2 weeks and doing nothing else. And, it can take time away from my family and all that too. I wasn't getting involved in that, but all the time I kind of associated with the project. That's all I was doing. So I don't have that much time or strength to do it. So like the example I have down here is like a normal person would have like 100%, but I have like 15% every day. So I really have to like know how much energy and scope it out. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this today, kind of thing, which sucks. But that's kind of why being disabled sucks. I rather not be disabled. Trust me, I rather be working, have a regular job, and not be disabled. Disabled is a horrible fucking thing. But even when so even when I showed people like with these bugs, it's not Hook of the Reaper's fault, right? Even when Demolish Shooter was turning green, it still wasn't doing outputs. They're like, okay, so how did you get the game going? And I'm like, okay. I thought a lot of time people would be going, oh, it's not Hook of the Reaper's fault? Okay, I would go off and figure out. But no, that was not the problem. They were like, okay, well, how do I get this game running? I want to get this game running. And I'm like, okay, I showed you it wasn't Hook of the Reaper's fault. But pretty much after kind of at the end of that 2 weeks, I came down to a decision to make. It's like, should I keep on doing giving technical support? Because when I started this project for open support, or sorry, open source project, I was like, well, I'll do it, but if it gets too much pain in the ass or get too much bullshit, I would just cut it off. And especially at the time, I had everything I needed, right? I had my Reaper. I did my 2 Reaper guns. I was doing all the game files for it. I pretty much had everything I needed because when I launched, I had the Reaper, the MX-24, which kind of worked. Had some bugs I had to fix, but that was like my. Then I had the gun for IR. I know the Reaper and the gun for IR had no problems, and I could just end the project and be fine with it, right? I could make up little updates and I wouldn't really care. I just walk away. Like I said, if it became too much of a problem, I'm just going to walk away from the project then. So I kind of had to make a decision about that. It's like, okay, all these like people are coming, overwhelming me with all this, and I'm like, hey, it's not Hook of the Reaper's fault, and they still wanted me to kind of go over it, and I felt like at the end of it, I felt like the majority of people, which I assumed was probably like over 90%, it has to be pretty high percent, had no problem with Hook of the Reaper. They got it running. They got the file. They knew all of the files I didn't have at the beginning, but then I got more game files, and that solved problems. But a lot of people never complained. They knew it was like, a project I was working on, getting things up to date, and knew I was going to get there. And also, these people were a little more experienced, I think. Most people I think I had a problem with is I kind of nickname them, this is baby's first bottle or baby's first light gun. And why I say that is I think a lot of these people never set up a retro gaming system, or they needed, or I think one guy told me, he's like, well, you need to tell me how to do this like a child. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm sorry. It's like I write all this thing out, and this is the time I wrote out a whole GitHub thing. I like did like an hour video showing the project and what it was shooting for, and people couldn't really grasp it. So it's just like, I'm sorry, I can't hold your hand through everything, and I just can't do that. And that's why I kind of call them like baby first bottle or baby's first light gun, because they pretty much need their hand held through everything, because they never done it, they never looked up doing it, and they're like, all they heard was, hey, there's a lot easier, MAME hooker, but it's a lot more easier to do. So a lot of people got it, then they tried to set up all the games, and they never set up these games before. But then recoil didn't work. Like I said, Demolish Shooter turned green, and boom, now they're filing bugs with Hook of the Reaper, even though it's not Hook of the Reaper's fault. And at the time, it was hard to tell the people, it's like, hey, this is not Hook of the Reaper's fault. You need to go do, Demolish Shooter's wiki and need to learn what you need to set up for the game. And even TechnoParrot, you need to learn to just know how to set these games up. They're not that straightforward sometimes. And people are like, well, I read it, or, oh, Demolish Shooter has a wiki. And I had to put that where, so like I said, like a lot of these people were, and most of the time it was just like I said, they never got a game running, and they just got their first light gun, and they never knew, sometimes they even know how their light gun even worked. So I was pretty much what I was doing. I wasn't doing technical support for Hook of the Reaper. The technical support I was doing is getting people getting their game set up and getting their light guns set up. So that's what I was doing, technical support. So if you read it saying, I do not do light gun support, I do not do like game support, This is kind of what it means. I'm not here to help you set up all your games. If a game is not working, okay, you shouldn't file an issue with me, you know. It's just like, but people couldn't understand that. They're like, "Oh, it's not working," and demolish shooter's green, and it's just like, uh. But I remember, so I remember when one guy is like, even with like, so okay, let's just look at light guns. So I remember one guy I was helping set up. He's like, he got one game running. Then after that, he said his recoil wasn't working on his light gun, and Hook of the Reaper did something and all that. And I was like, I think, and he had a Reaper, so I was like, I think you just have that switch on the side of the gun in the middle. You just need to move it front or back. And he's like, wrote back, well, yeah, I think that's what it is. But he never said it was or not. But I pretty much knew what it was. He probably, for when he was doing Hook of the Reaper, he just put it in the middle so he wasn't getting any recoil. Then when the game worked with the recoil, then it shut off. And he's like, oh my God, Hook of the Reaper didn't do, he's messed up my recoil on the gun. And it's just like, oh my God. And it's like, that's where I'm kind of getting shown. Trying to tell people where people didn't even know the light gun really that well. They didn't even read the manual. A lot of times I had to tell people to read their manual of their light gun. And they're like, what? It comes with a manual? And I'm like, yes. With the email, like especially with the Reapers, they emailed it to you. And they're like, oh, it was in the email? And I'm like, oh my God. This is kind of some of the problems. Then, so okay, now that's the light gun. Let's get into the emulators and games. And like I said, most people never set up Demolish Shooter. They never set up MAME. So this is like their first time ever doing it. They just bought a light gun because they probably saw a video. Now they're trying to put everything together, which is not an easy task. I remember doing it and getting everything together. And I kind of go through the whole story about how I created Hook of the Reaper. It was because of MAME Hooker wasn't working. But I understood it all and all that. And I think majority of people do. I know it's just a small minority of people just are like, just tell me what I need to do. And I'm like, dude, sorry, I can't help you all the time. That's kind of what it comes down to. And, I remember one guy I was helping. I remember one problem. Even I helped him get like most all of his games working then. And this is after I proved Hook of the Reaper wasn't the fault and got most of his game. Then he's like, well, these games are not working. And I was like, okay, you need to read Demolish Shooter's wiki. And he's like, I did, and it's still not working. What the hell? So I had to go read the wiki, figure out what he's doing wrong. And I remember I went back and said, hey, you're not doing this and this and this. Boom, issue closed. I was like, sorry. I'm like, it's not the Hooker or the Reaper's fault. That was pretty much the time I was pretty much done at the end of the 2 weeks of going through all these. And some of it I knew at the end, I knew a lot of people couldn't just look at the outputs, right? This is time before I didn't have LGTCPTester. So that's why the reason why I wrote LGTCPTester is just to try to get rid of these bugs a lot of times. Because people are like, well, how can I look at the outputs? And I had to tell them you can use, PuTTY or look out the window of Hook of the Reaper and put the display down really low to like 2 milliseconds or something. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, oh my God. So that's why I just wrote it out. And once I wrote that out, a lot of these things just pretty much on GitHub went away. But they're still, even around today, I still will get, Demolish Shooter turn green and it's not working, no recoil. What do I do? And I'm like, okay. So, and I know a lot of people are like, whoa, I thought you just know. And the sad thing is, like, there's like 200 light gun games. I'm sorry, I don't keep up on every light gun game. And no, because TechnoParrot will update and the game will go out and people are like, oh my God, it's not working. What do you do? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like I haven't played that game for months. So it's just like, and also, like I said, TechnoParent doesn't update, and then it messes probably with something with Demol Shooter, but somehow I always know, kind of thing. And I know it's just, but like, and another thing I always hate is when people sent me their run config files. And one of the reasons why I always hated it is I knew the people did not run it line by line, because that's like a standard debug thing, is run your run config line by line to make sure nothing is airing out, because you can, a lot of times people will run it with these run things, and sometimes they won't even never know if any of these commands will air out or anything, because it's just running in the system. So a lot of times what I did is like I just ran it line by line and sometimes find out, oh, you had a comma there or something. And so, and also it's just like, why am I why the hell am I debugging somebody's run config file? It's just like, sorry. It's like, is there a problem with Hook of the Reaper? And they're like, well, it's not working with this run config file. And I'm like, okay. And still, like I said, have you run it line by line? They're like, no. And it's like, or people always like paste their run config file and said, is this correct? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, did you read Demol Shooter's wiki? I mean, like Hook of the Reaper just reads the outputs. You just start it and that's running it and all that. But like I said, it's just like it always comes down to me all the time. And that's why I have to say no with technical support. So I don't have the time. I'm disabled. I have family, I have a kid just started college. So no, I just can't not do it. And like I said, all I'm going to do is it's not going to be with problems with Hook of the Reaper. It's always going to be technical support getting games running, right? And sorry, I just do not do that. So, like I said, I had to make a decision about the technical support. And, I felt like I said, the majority, when it came down to it, I felt like I was punishing the majority because of the small minority, right? If something went on wrong, they run and ask somebody. They don't do any basic debug anything. The first thing they do is just run, go, this is not working. And that's like, sorry. So I didn't finish. I just didn't want to punish the majority because of this small minority who wanted like support on how to get everything running all the time. So that's why it's like, okay, I'm going to continue Hook of the Reaper, but I'm just not going to do any technical support. If there's a bug, okay, great. If there's no bug, then sorry, don't talk to me. I mean, sorry, not to be rude or anything, but I just don't have the time. And like I said, lots of the times I haven't even played, like, I made sure that game file runs. It ran, a long time ago. It could be 6 months ago, but like I said, TechnoParent could update it. It doesn't work anymore because of an issue. Will get fixed, in a couple months. So then, so like I said, just kind of beating the dead horse. I think just people having a problem with light gun or light gun setup. So I think in the end, it was a good call. I think a lot of the bug count just, especially after I got the LGTCP tester in, pretty much the bug count pretty much went to zero for, I think, DS turned green. I think I had like one or two maybe after it, but still, I still see it around. I think I just recently saw one on the forums or something, but it happens all the time. People are always like, "This is not working," But I think people is getting better now. Now, like when I said on the DS, turn green but no recoil bug video, like people know there is a Demol Shooter wiki now, so that's a big step. Because when I started this, people didn't even know Demol Shooter had a wiki. And a lot of times it is like, oh, the mall shooter just does outputs. That's it. And it's just like, no. So, I mean, so it is getting better. I think people are kind of more getting better situated on how things run and all that. But pretty much every time I put a new light gun in, Hook of the Reaper, it's gonna happen. I know. I mean, these people will put the bugs up and all that. Those, so a lot of times will just ignore, the whole like read me here and all, and just post away issues and all that. And it's just like, but that's just gonna happen, and it's not that big of a problem. It's not like I'm taking, like I said, 2 weeks now. Now I just like, boom, just close it, say sorry, no technical support kind of thing. But in the end, like I said, it was the right call to do because I'm sure a lot of people would like to have Hook of the Reaper now and where it is versus me leaving at it like right at the beginning. So I think the majority of the people would vote yes. So, but that's the whole kind of convoluted reason why I don't do technical support. In the end, I just can't do it. So I'm sorry. And also, if you think you're one of these people I kind of made fun of or anything, I'm sorry. It's just like barely remember anybody names or anything. My memory is horrible, so please don't take any offense about anything. If you think you're one of these people or not, it's just if I mean it's not. It's like I don't even remember that long time ago or whoever did those bugs. So please don't feel bad. Take nothing personal. Okay, bye.